Elliot Hanson, I know you and as Olympic campaigner representing Great Britain in the laser Tokyo 2020, but I know that you've also been getting into the keel boat sailing. And now I hear that you're even running programs. So that sounds like quite a big deal, actually running a team. So what's that transition been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, baptism of fire in many ways, and a hell of a lot of fun, I think. Yeah, the irony, I think, of coming from single-handed sailing, but I really, really enjoy sailing in teams. Sort of running in teams, never really something I aimed to do, but ended up doing so. I think a bit of it inherently comes from when you end up doing the tactician role and you sort of end up overseeing the program and the direction and some of the decisions that happen behind the scenes. I am sailing with Julian Metherell in a Cape 31 class in the UK, and for the second season, and I'd done two previous Cape seasons before that.
One of the things that I would imagine must be difficult for a single-handed sailor is that you've got your way of doing things, and it would be easy to assume that everybody else on board thinks like you. I think we all live in our own heads and assume that everyone sees the world in a similar way to ourselves. Did you find that you struggled with that preconception and then you ran into a brick wall where some people just really don't see the world the same way that you do?
Yeah, I don't particularly have massively strong opinions on doing things a certain way. The only thing for me personally is you just getting the culture in the team on the boat, the learning environment right. I've had so much enjoyment, I would say, from starting with a team and a group of people that aren't on paper, we as a collective group aren't the all-star A team out there, nor have we got the biggest budget nor the most time, but perhaps across the board the quickest learners, and from I think learning quickly comes the fun side to it. That's where we get our fun. I think there's this other side of big boat sailing where it's all about the sort of force fun, which it's all about how many beers you can have, and that's what you. But I think over time, the teams want to do well. I mean, it's competition, so certainly the owners want to do well, and so I'd push more towards that side of, well, you get your fun from results. You fine have a couple of beers here or there, but it's not so much about the onshore fun rather than results.
But results by itself can be a bit of a slippery path as well, can't it? Because if you don't have the ability to put as much time and as much money into some of the other campaigns around you, then you're probably going to come up disappointed.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's about expectation, I think. And you're working within and nobody's programs are the same. And I say, might not have the most time and the biggest budget, say, versus other teams, but we would have more time and a bigger budget than some of the smaller teams. And so, what I find difficult in some ways, big boat sailing, is it's very hard at times to compare yourself boat to boat, or as a tactician, say, sailor to sailor, because you're kind of operating on a different parameters, and I think that's just the more people you get involved from team stuff, and part of the reason I love going back laser sailing, single-handed sailing is, I go and do the single-handed laser sailing stuff, and you can really line yourself up man for man on the start line, and the more people and different factors coming in and a bigger boat campaign, you sort of lose that. Sure, some of them are similar, but if I beat or if we beat a boat on the water, but we've done X amount of days more training, or we're going quicker because we've got more sails, or whatever, you sort of like, okay, yeah, sort of expect to beat them. And vice versa. If somebody smokes us, you're like, as much as I'd love to beat them, and you go out there and you try that, and many times it's possible. Some days it just isn't, and you sort of lose that. So I think that's been an interesting point I've learned as well.
And what about the structure of the day? Are there certain things that always happen in the routine? Like the classic one is the after race debrief, but is there a pre-race brief? So tell me about the sort of the building blocks if there are any, that really help structure that team spirit.
Yeah, I think so. Setting the scene for the day, priming people really for what's to come. Forecast, likely manoeuvres. There's a couple of sort of tricky boat handling manoeuvres that the day might throw up because of the tide or the forecast, or and also just as the regatta moves forward, you're sort of adjusting the day for the regatta context. You may end up in a match race scenario that day, or you may just be looking to build a series, and it's really trying to sort of prime people in the team for that and set the tone. I think is worth its weight.
Yeah. And what about during racing when something goes wrong? How much of a debrief would you try and do in the moment, and how much will you put in a box for the debrief at the end of the day?
I think you got to box. Yeah, you got to box as much as you can. It depends on the scenario. I think the interesting one as a tactician is you do many cases on the whole set the tone for the boat, just because I think you're the one talking the most. Sometimes your voice needs to be raised purely because of it's windy, there's sails flapping, it's loud. People need to hear. You need to be clear and communicate. And equally, you might want to fire people up. You might feel like the team needs to just sharpen up a little bit, and I think that's something we can only all get better at is recognizing that in a team, and equally on balance on a light wind day, you sort of need to calm the boat down a bit and make everyone smooth with what they're doing. And I think it's interesting to watch the boat change and the crew change their behavior based on the tone you set on the boat is interesting.
So there is a place for shouting then in the right circumstances, done in the right way. I've put down that sort of preconception earlier that shouting is not a good thing, but it can be a good thing in the right circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you're saying. If someone at the front of the boat needs to hear you, then they need to hear you. So shouting. It's not shouting at someone to put them down. It's shouting at someone to communicate a clear, yeah, bit of
Message.
comms.
Yeah.
So
And I'm sure you've experienced this on keel boats where there is sort of a mood of them and us the further you go up the hiking rail, that sometimes the troops at the front in the trenches doing all the hard
yeah,
manual labour are feeling a bit put upon by the white collars at the back doing all the doing all the flouncing about. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
yeah. No, we joke about it all the time.
And is that
you
is
know.
that the way to get around it? Because it's obviously that can be a bit
Uh,
cancerous if you allow it to
yeah,
fester.
it's look, I mean, I haven't done it for years and years. There's people far more experienced you can talk to about it. But one thing you notice is the guys at the front of the boat love what they do. They don't want to be involved in not all of them anyway. They love the hustle of the front, problem solving and foreseeing problems even and acting before it's happened. Quite often the guys at the front are one step ahead of what's the guys at the back. You're just operating on a different wavelength, and that's what makes a good team in that sense. Yeah, I've always been slightly light-hearted in terms of the guys on the boat. We call it the cheap seats or the first class. We joke that obviously the first class is at the front. Um,
Right. Nice.
it's at the front of the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then every now and then on the way in, on a commute in, we might swap. I think it's quite good practice, a bit of cross learning and who's doing what, and you end up with a bit of respect for what the guys at the front are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're the nuts and bolts of the team really that help a boat round the course. I mean, ultimately, a tactician's deciding when to tack, jibe, drop, where you're going, that sort of thing, but they're the mechanics really, the nitty gritty. And you see, they put in a shift on windy days. Even between races, it's pretty relentless for those guys in terms of repacking kites and bailing the boat out and making repairs but they love it. They love
Yeah.
it.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. It's a really good insight. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to touch on that we haven't already talked about? Any other thoughts that come to
Um,
mind?
no, not necessarily. No. Yeah, that's good.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Cheers, Andy.